Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I'll be doing a review of Les Misérables by Victor Hugo. Yeah, this might just be a mammoth of a review. It's probably going to be lots of rambling. I took some notes. I don't expect to get through it all, but hopefully it'll kind of structure at least some things that I'll hit upon. So I think this is the Ping 1 Deluxe, like classics version. Sorry. Yeah. It's about 1,300 pages. I read it over July and August. So, yeah, about 2 months I spent time reading it. Yeah, it was published in 1862 by Victor Hugo. I thought I would start by giving some like background information about Hugo and the novel itself, really. So Victor Hugo thought of himself really as a creature of the 19th century. What has been termed by historians as the long 19th century, particularly in France, in that, well, I don't know how much like French history you were coming into this video or this book even, how much French history you have. It's pretty ridiculous. France in the 1800s. I'll give like a quick Cliff Notes version of it. To even start, we have to start before even the 19th century. I mean, we have to start with the French Revolution, of course. Right. So there's the French Revolution in 1789. The Reign of Terror, all that. Okay, then eventually, lots of stuff happens, but I'm trying to get into the century, okay? Okay, then comes the 1800s. There's Napoleon. He does his coup. He sort of dissolves the Republic. Oh, I should go back. Okay, so initially, for a long, long time, there was the Bourbon monarchy, the Bourbon kings. Obviously, the French Revolution got rid of them. Okay, so then there's the French Revolution, 1800s. Napoleon comes in, does his coup, declares himself emperor, dissolves the Republic. Then there's the Napoleonic Wars for, quite a while, where the rest of Europe waged war against the man. Eventually, they got the upper hand of him, and they exiled him. Then the Bourbons came back, the monarchs. And then, of course, Napoleon escaped in 1815 and began his 100 days, his return to power. The Bourbon monarchy fled again. Then Napoleon lost the Battle of Waterloo and was exiled permanently this time. Then the Bourbons came back a second time. And then they ruled for a while until 1830. There was this revolution, the July Revolution. And they sort of got rid of the Bourbon branch of the monarchy. They replaced the king with his cousin, Louis Philippe, the citizen king, who would be more apparently amenable to the parliament, much more, I guess you would say, comparatively Republican king. And then in 1848, there was another revolution after the sort of spring times of the people, as it were. And Louis Philippe was gotten... I don't actually know off the top of my head if he was still king or not. I believe he was. Right, anyway. In any case, 1848, there's another revolution, and they get rid of the monarchy altogether. They declare the Second Republic. And then they elect as their first president Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew, Napoleon III. Well, he called himself Napoleon III. His name was Louis Napoleon. Then the Second Republic's president, Louis Napoleon, kind of does another coup, declares himself Napoleon III, and says that the Second Empire has begun. So we go from the Second Republic to the Second Empire. And this goes on for a while until this disastrous Franco-Prussian War, which ends up with Napoleon III getting captured, Paris getting occupied. Yeah, the complete like dissolution of the empire. And so they declare the Third Republic, and it doesn't start off. It doesn't work. It doesn't start off well. There's this Paris Commune that sort of had to violently be put down. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty rocky in the beginning, and it lasted, into the 1900s, but it didn't last forever. So now you got some context. Obviously, that's kind of a lot. And I've always had some trouble like trying to like ascertain like the psychology of like a French man. Like, how do you like, I don't know, like accept all these crazy party, like how do you like navigate those like political waters when you have like getting legitimists who are like supportive of legitimists who are supportive of the Bourbons. You have Bonapartists, you have like Chartists, you have Republicans, Socialists. There's a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. In any case, Victor Hugo grew up in this time, and he's kind of emblematic of like all the chaos I was just saying. Like, how do you navigate all that? If you've read this book, I guess then you are sort of familiar with the character, Marius. That's kind of like Victor Hugo's self-insert character. They share a lot of the same biographical details in that Victor Hugo started his political life as a supporter of the Napoleon Bonaparte, because his estranged father was a soldier in Napoleon's army, was granted title from the emperor. But slowly over the course of his life, he moved more and more leftward. Where he started and where he ended politically was pretty stark. And it's kind of integral because this is a very political novel. And Victor Hugo himself was in and out of politics. I mean, he was elected to office a couple of different times. He never stayed for super long, but he is part politician, so it's kind of integral. Right. So to the novel itself, this was not Victor Hugo's first novel. He had success writing poetry, and he had the Hunchback of Notre Dame. All that stuff was major success. He was a big name, and he began writing Les Misérables. He wrote it over the course of like 17 years, and there's like a 12-year gap in between when he started and when he ended. Like, he didn't touch it at all. Like, he wrote the first 4 parts of the 5-part novel 12 years before he wrote the 5th part. And like I said, he was going through a lot of like political revolution himself, and he went back, like a lot of the anecdote chapters that people take issue with was added after the 12-year hiatus. So yeah. And some people are like, yeah, it's kind of hard to square away like what the message is to get away from this book. Okay, I'm trying not to get ahead of myself, okay? So that's Les Misérables. Due to some clever marketing strategies, it was pretty much an instant bestseller. The first part was released before all the rest, and it found immediate success in France as well as in England even. That sort of kind of persists to this day. I guess this is a good time as any to mention the musical. Personally, I've never seen it. The book Les Misérables is my first, I guess you would say, I don't know what you would say, like foray into the work. So I don't really have any emotional investment or fealty to the musical, but I understand that that isn't the case for most people. I guess it was like quite the phenomenon back then. I checked out some like clips from the musical as I was reading this. It seems cool. I mean, but I'm not really talking about the musical. I don't really have anything to say about it. Right. I'm just talking about the book. But I know the musical exists, and that's like people's main way of consuming the story. But I can't really speak to anything about it. So maybe we could like leave that here for now. Okay. All right. Yeah. How do I want to like go from here? I've kind of like wrote basically like almost essays about various things as I was reading the book. I'm probably not going to go over everything, so maybe I'll try to find like the most relevant stuff. Okay, let me look at my notes here. Okay. Okay, I guess I'll talk about. I think I'll start speaking about the book, like generally speaking, and I feel like this would be like the first, like I don't know, people might start turning off the video at this point. So what did I think of the book? Right, I'm gonna have to say that I'm not the biggest fan. I wasn't really that impressed with Les Misérables. There's a lot of things that kind of that really grated on me over time. You spend a lot of time with the author, and he makes a lot of digressions. The If you have any familiarity with the book, you know, like the Waterloo, he spends like 50 pages sort of diverging or like going away from the main plot of the story to talk about Waterloo. He talks about the sewers of Paris. I don't think that's inherently bad. The problem is that there's a lot of buy-in for like what he's saying. And if you don't actually like agree or find his musings amusing or true, it's kind of eye-rolly. And this is coming from someone who has like probably a lot of patience. Like I read the Waterloo digression and I thought it was really interesting. I don't know where I want to go with this. I guess I'm really not doing this well. I should have said that. Let me take a step back for a moment, okay, guys. Back to the book here. I guess I didn't say that it was translated by this Christine Donougher, and it has this excellent introduction by this guy. I think his name is Robert Toombs. I read the introduction after I finished the book, and it definitely illuminated a lot of things for me. Let's go back to the Battle of Waterloo. So Victor Hugo spends 50 pages speaking about the Battle of Waterloo. I did find it interesting. I like history. I was pretty captivated. The chaos of it was incredible. Unfortunately, I looked into it. Okay, so let me explain. So he describes how there's just this like cavalry charge, the French cavalry charge against the English, and then later their reinforcements, the Prussians. This cavalry charge, they fall into a trap. The French cavalry go right into this muddy road, basically, and they start sinking and falling over each other and like drowning in this mud. I was like, wow, this is actually like horrifying. How I never heard of this like aspect of Waterloo before. And then I like looked it up, and apparently it was like local legend that when Victor Hugo went to Waterloo, he got from like the people who lived there and they just like pass it off as like what actually happened as history within the book. So basically, he pulled a Herodotus, where he's like, uh, it's not really history. He's just basically taking like what makes a good story and passing it off as history. So that was kind of disappointing. So apparently the whole sunken road thing never actually happened, which kind of killed my investment, because I don't want to hear someone's like fake like proselytizing history. And the Robert Graves introduction sort of casted a whole Waterloo inclusion in a different light as well. He said that was kind of part of Victor Hugo's broader political, I guess, project to sort of like reclaim nationalism away from Napoleon III, because when Napoleon III was when he declared himself emperor, Victor Hugo exiled himself. I always find that kind of funny. People neglect that. They're like, he was exiled. He's like, he exiled himself and like rejected the amnesty to come back if he wanted it. He kind of had, I'm not I don't really care about Napoleon III. I think he's kind of a goofball, but he kind of had like a derangement syndrome about Napoleon III, Victor Hugo, that is. Yeah. In any case, so yeah, his inclusion of the Battle of Waterloo here was kind of part of this project to like try to reframe the whole event. It's not a victory for England and not a victory for Bonaparte, Napoleon I, that is, because by this point he moved away from being a Bonapartist or whatever. Yeah, he tries to like reframe the thing as like an ironic, like Providence ordained twist of fate, where, in his opinion, the mediocre Wellington beated like the genius, like innovator Napoleon Bonaparte, and it only could have happened with the consent of God. But really, the victory didn't go to the English people, Hugo says, or it didn't go to the English generals. It went to the people. The people and the soldiers who fought the battle, and that France didn't really lose Waterloo. It's true that Napoleon fell, and Napoleon was like the last breath of the French Revolution, but he's like, the French Revolution, well, he's like, though they lost at Waterloo and then the Bourbons came back, that just meant that the Republicans, or the Republican spirit, went from the battlefield to the chambers, to the legislature. In other words, that, well, instead of fighting for the Republican vision on the battlefield, now they're fighting for it in politics. So he's like, thanks, guys. You might have technically defeated Napoleon, English, but you just actually helped us because you just redirected the revolution. And he's like, and so it's a victory for the people. Anyway, so that's his like reframing of the Battle of Waterloo. I mean, it's, I don't know. Whatever, dog. Whatever. Anyway, the point of all that is that there's a lot more buy-in from me personally for some of his digressions, but even me, I couldn't. It was painful to listen to his chapters about Paris as an atom, Paris as a mine, his chapter about slang. These are pretty, oh my God. If to drag myself through these chapters, they're incredibly tedious. And I will say, before going more in on Hugo here, that there are some genuine page-turning moments. The convent escape, the robbery, the fall of the barricade, these are all genuinely page-turning moments. The problem is that interspersed between these great moments from the book is all this ridiculous digression. Hugo has this incredibly infuriating, I don't know, narration style. He has this like ridiculous and unnecessary use of extended metaphors, like grossly disproportionate in complexity to his underlying point or comparison. It's constantly like metaphor after metaphor expressing the same point, and they're really not that in depth. Like, I know there's multiple drafts to Les Miserables, but it kind of reads like he had multiple. That's the thing. Okay, so I know he went through this book a couple times. Obviously, when he took the 12-year break or whatever, but it kind of feels like he had multiple drafts or multiple ways of phrasing things, and he couldn't decide which one he liked more. So he like included them all. So he's like saying the same thing over and over and over again, just in like different ways, like a different metaphor to express the same idea. It's so, oh my God, so repetitive. But not only that, I mean, that's just the metaphor portion that I have issue with. He just has a really annoying way of speaking. I feel like I'm opening myself up to criticism there. I couldn't help but notice there's almost like a pattern to the way he like organizes a paragraph. There's always invariably like short declarative statements or premises. It's almost like syllogistic, like it's a matter of speaking. Like, oh my God, he'll go on this long. I almost thought about writing a parody to include in this video. I thought about it. I'm not going to go with one off the top of my head. I'm trying to get this video with as little editing as possible, so I can actually get this out. I don't have a lot of time to edit stuff. For example, he'll be like, blah 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 blah. This is called X, or you'd be like, this is called X, or X is called Y. Like, for example, he's like, I don't know. This is called love. And the love that permeates through the air is called the spirit of the French people. And the spirit of the French people is the Republican sword of the world. I don't know, something like that. Yeah. Like I said, he basically has premises, and then he has like conclusions that are sort of like come from these premises. It's almost like, yeah, like a logic, like a philosophical, like logic, whatever, syllogism. It's kind of cringe. And like I said, if you don't buy into what he's saying, it's just kind of like prattling on of like I don't know, an overeager, I don't know what you'd say. An overexcited lad who's talking your ear off. He's like, X is called Y. But just, put X and Y, whatever. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying not to be guilty of the same thing I'm accusing him of. It's kind of, yeah. But not only that, there's pretty much what I would say unforgivable infringements, unavoidable or unforgivable. I'm going to say it's unforgivable writing choices. He'll have single sentences going on for entire paragraphs, sometimes an entire page. I think one of the longest sentences in literature comes from the book. It's pretty ridiculous. It's literally unreadable. Like I don't think it's possible to like comprehend a sentence that goes on for so long with several clauses. Like an entire page, one sentence, it's not readable. I don't know what you're doing. Like, what are you doing? I compared him to Herodotus a little bit ago, but perhaps his true analog is Homer. At one instance, I don't know if you read the Iliad. It's kind of like this meme. Maybe I'll put it on the screen. If you have read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. For some reason, so Homer like will go run down this like laundry list of like ship names or like the characters like and who they're like related to, just like in a long row. And for some unfathomable reason, Victor Hugo decides at one point to like import literally Homer like neurotically like listing out all these like superfluous details. I don't know why Victor Hugo decided to like fucking like copy paste that into his like book. Why are you doing this, dog? But then I realized that Homer's probably like his biggest idol, because then Victor Hugo does that sort of nonsense all the time too. He'll be like, the winding streets of Paris, dash. And then he'll like list 20 French streets, dash, and then continue with what he was saying. Like, what are you doing, dog? What are you doing? I don't know what. Or he'll just talk about like stuff that's irrelevant to the book. Right. I guess I didn't. Okay. So remember I was talking about like a French history or whatever. And I was talking about the Revolution of 1830. Right. So like the main crux of this book, or the main drama piece or whatever, action set, is kind of like the last dying embers of that 1830 revolution, like the 1832 student uprisings in Paris. Yeah. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Anyway, so that's pretty much the scope of the book. The book ends in like 1833. But for some reason, when he's describing the 1832 like barricades in the streets, he's like, they weren't as impressive as the 1848 barricades. What are you doing? And then he spends like a couple chapters talking about the 1848 barricades outside the scope, outside of the time span of this book. Oh my God. Like, that's literally unforgivable. And not only that, like I said, the stuff he talks about is it's just completely ridiculous. This is a completely subjective, I guess, and personal assessment, but I find it like social, political, like analysis to to be completely like overly simplistic and facile. It's kind of like how like modern writers or like actors, if you go on like their Twitter or whatever, they have like indistinguishable political opinions from like a Facebook mom. That's kind of how I think of it. Like, really, this is like the depth of your like political analysis, bruh. It's, oh my God, dog. Really not impressed. He kind of has this unhealthy, like childish, nonsensical obsession with the concept of progress. And the apotheosis of this would be, or nadir if you'd like, would be this like chapter 20. I think it's in part 5. It's like one of the most ridiculous things I've ever read. There's so much things I want to say. But I know this is like incoherent already because I'm like jumping from topic to topic. I'm sorry. I'm like looking at like different paths of things I want to say. Let me like regroup for a second here. Let me think. Okay, I guess I'll move on past what I was going to say. Maybe I'll say it later. And he just gets lazy sometimes. Victor Hugo, that is. Like some of his characters, the friends of the ABC, the grandfather, Marius's grandfather later in the book, are literally just the narrator. They have the exact same syntax and voice. It's kind of like crazy. Like, what are you doing? I feel like a good comparison, in a way, to Les Misérables would be like Moby Dick. That's another book people kind of chastise because it talks about, I don't know, whale facts or something like that. But it's just so much better. Moby Dick, Herman Melville's like in every way a superior version of Les Miserables. What is like Paris as an atom compared to like the whiteness of the whale? In Moby Dick is like Les Miserables done right, in the sense that, in like the I don't know what you'd say, like the structure of the work, the anecdotes in Moby Dick are interesting. The prose in Les Miserables has less artistry than Moby Dick. Unlike Melville, Hugo has no restraint. he's basically trying to say, I think he said it himself, that he's basically trying to say everything. But the problem, in my opinion, is that you can't really have a theme or like a coherent like message when you're basically saying everything. Like there's no, I think true artistry sometimes entails holding back and not saying everything, choosing not to say stuff, so you have a more, I don't know what you would say, a more distilled book, a more clear theme is sometimes like maybe the most important part of being an artist. And Victor Hugo doesn't get it, okay? His book says everything and risks saying nothing in particular. Unlike Melville's Moby Dick. Okay. All right. I feel like I need to take a breather here. Let me get water break time. Okay. I think I'm going to talk about like one more thing before I go into like more character specific like analysis, okay? So we talked about how Victor Hugo's like political opinions changed over time. Victor Hugo was actually at the 1832 Paris uprising. He got caught between the army or the soldiers on the one side and the basically like student workers. I think they're mostly young working class kids or whatever. On the other side, he got in between the gunfire and had to take cover for like 15 minutes. The interesting thing about that, though, is that at the time, he actually opposed the student insurrectionists. And furthermore, in 1848, he spent time, I think he actually participated in taking down a barricade in that revolution, because he transitioned from a Bonapartist basically to being a moderate, I guess you would say, Orleanist. That is, he supported Louis Philippe, a sort of hopefully moderate monarchy, amenable to the republic, or I guess more like Republican types of sentiments. Basically like a constitutional monarchy, basically, but not quite, but close. And so like the revolutions that he positively portrays later in his life, including this 1832 revolution, he was on the other side of at the time. It's just interesting to think about. And the introduction by Toombs kind of elucidates this point even more. Like the general project of the book is kind of like balancing like his inner tension, Victor Hugo's tension between, it's basically him trying to reconcile his political, I guess, like change over time. He basically is trying to like figure out why. Okay, let's talk about the book, Les Misérables. Most people think that means like the Misérables, but it really translates to the wretched. And what is the wretched? Well, I'm glad you asked. What does Victor Hugo's have to say about the wretched? Who are the wretched? Well, I can't see. 1 second. There is a point where the poor and the wicked become mixed up and lumped together in the one fateful word, Les Misérables, the wretched. Whose fault is this? And we'll kind of get into this point more in a second when we talk about Javert and Jean Valjean. But there's kind of like a, I don't know if you want to say cognitive dissonance going on here. Because Hugo's basically trying to like figure out and like the seemingly contradictory ideas. He's trying to reconcile, you know, like the noble Jean Valjean and the wicked Thénardiers. And he's trying to get how like a mob, the mass of people can be enlightened, you know, Republicans or whatever, or they can be like a inveterate, like terrible mob. And he kind of like in his book about the, in his chapter about the differences, he spends this chapter about talking about like insurrections and riots or whatever. And this is like what I mean by like, it's kind of shallow. So basically he's trying to figure out like when is like rioting justified or whatever. And basically he comes to this conclusion. That's pretty, oh my God. He's like, well, you know, the insurrection in this date is a bad thing, but on this date, it's the greatest thing. They're liberators. Or if it's done by this people, it's bad. Or if it's by these people, it's good. And so how does he determine, like, what is the, what is he grading on here? Basically, like, this is what I'm talking about, like, with this ridiculous, like, I guess, like, deification of progress. Oh my God, I don't even want to get into, like, why it's kind of, like, ultra dumb. It should be kind of obvious that progress, anyway, I can't stay on a straight point here. Anyway, basically he says that if the revolution, insurrection, riot, or whatever is in accordance with progress, that it's justified and kind of like morally good. Come on, bro. This is what I mean by like indistinguishable like opinions from like Facebook moms. It's like you see it all the time with your writers, your authors, or whatever. You go on their Twitter, and it's the most. Oh my God, I don't want to be mean. Like brain dead thing you've ever seen in your life. Anyway, but I say this, and I can't wait to get all the dislikes. Is that I think modern day readers take it even farther than Hugo did. Because, like I said, Hugo acknowledges that the wretched, or les miserables, exist. These corrupt and irredeemable Thénardiers, they exist. I've like completely lost like track of what my point was when I began like this tirade. Right, I think I was talking about like the tension inherent, like the tension in the novel or whatever. Basically between like Hugo's like past and present when he wrote this book, his political evolution. Because by the end of his life, you know, he's elected to office during the Third Republic. I think he quits his office because like the government's too conservative for him. And then there's the Paris Commune, and I think he offers like protection for them in Belgium, and he gets like kicked out of that country for that reason. To be fair, I think he called the communards idiots or whatever, but I mean, like I said, he went from Bonapartist to Republican to, I mean, I don't know. I guess where was I going with this? So he goes from like opposing like the 1832 student uprisings and the 1848 revolution to becoming I don't know. I think like Napoleon III broke his brain, maybe. Not gonna lie. Anyways, like this book is kind of wild in that he's like balancing like two aspects of himself that are radically different, him in the past and him today, who have like not quite opposite political opinions, but definitely contradictory ones. And that's kind of present in this book. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the most controversial part of the video. Okay. We're about to visit Reddit. Okay. This is epic. I saw a good... So I wanted to know what people were saying. I wanted to know what people were... What's going on? What's the discussion like for Les Misérables? So I went to Reddit. And I have to give some props. And I guess you don't know who I am, but that's me giving props to anything related to Reddit is quite the development because I kind of despise the platform. But I did see an interesting post. I'm going to read it to you. Ignore that. It's talking about the musical, unfortunately, but I think this will segue nice into our discussion, okay? Okay. Listening to the original recording of Les Mis on the way into work, and I started reflecting on how it seems like Javert stuff had changed over the years. I've seen productions for literal decades. Okay, that's kind of wild, bruh. And something that seems to be a more recent trend is Javert singing more nasally/snarkily, for lack of a better word. Basically, singing Javert the opposite of the way Louis sang him. And then this is the insightful good post. I totally agree. I think, and this is total speculation, that it may have something to do with people producing Broadway shows, not to mention the movie, kind of losing their ability to personally relate to Javert these days. As the political divide has deepened, pushing both sides further to the left or right, I think that many of the liberal/progressive people involved in producing Les Mis, especially if they are younger and or lack a couple more decades of hard-earned self-awareness, tend to emphatically dislike Javert and not relate to him as a person, which is tragic because he's in there, all in all of us, as is Valjean. In the past, I feel that almost everyone was able to see a little bit of themselves in both Valjean and Javert, but that was before we were so socio-politically polarized and psychologically split/defended as a society. Sorry, I'm kind of far away from the screen. These days, however, it's become so much easier and natural for many left-leaning creatives to viscerally hate and despise Javert, seeing him as a white male authoritarian figure, an oppressor, literally a cop, not to mention very rigid and fanatical in his worldview and actions, which he is, but he's more than that. So they play him as a mustache-twirling villain in some ways, and they have zero empathy for him and encourage the audience to hate him through subtle coding of his character. Right. Like I said, I haven't seen the musical. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I checked out this Reddit thread, which kind of confirmed Sorry, I was just checking out. I think I actually clicked something. I was like, what the heck is that? Sorry. I'm trying really hard not to edit this video, so I'll probably leave that in. So I checked out this Reddit post, this one, which was kind of confirming this guy's suspicion about, I guess just the hatred for Javert. Is Javert even widely considered a villain? I see a lot of arguments how he's not a villain. He's just taking his job/law too seriously. And I agree, but I don't think that's a hot take anymore. Do you think most people would consider him a villain or not? And then check this out. Check this shit out, dog. Sorry for the language. Check this out. All cops are bastards. Dude stole some bread for fuck's sake. This guy replies, also tried to escape multiple times. That's why he served 19 years, not just the breaking a window to steal someone's bread. Valjean also mugged a child, of course, but... Then this frickin' chode, he's like, it doesn't matter. When you put a man in an unjust and torturous situation, it's only natural for that man to attempt to flee. They reply, do you think the entire prison system at the time was unjust? Or just jail time for breaking into someone's house and stealing from them? This guy's like, the whole point of the book is that the legal and prison system is fundamentally unjust. What are you even doing here on this subreddit if you disagree? Just to be clear, stuff like this person are among like the most disgusting to me. Seriously, absolutely like repulsive. What are you even doing on the subreddit if you disagree? And then this guy has another comment. He's a villain. It's just that he's a villain because of traits that would normally mark a character as heroic. He's honest, hardworking, and morally incorruptible. It's just that what he thinks is the right thing to do is performing violence on behalf of the state. People are used to villainous cops being corrupt, greedy, and incompetent, when Javert is none of these things. He's a bad person because he's a good cop. Cute. All right. So I was checking all this stuff out. This stuff was stewing in my head. And then I obviously read the book. And I guess I like passionately did all these bullet points talking about Javert and the law. What? Oh my God. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily defending Javert, insofar as I would say it seems that it's popular to hate the character. I think that needs to be reeled in. I think there's more sympathy that needs to be given to the character. Yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna like read this out, like bullet points, I guess. All right, I want to start by saying that no one actually believes the law is infallible and perfectly covers every situation. The law is contrived by the most fallible of creatures, man. Sometimes you get things wrong. Sometimes laws are even bad and contradict higher ideals. However, I think there's an intuitive, if largely unacknowledged, consensus toward the law anyway. That is to say that people still break for the law, not break the law, but like break for the law subconsciously, even if they consciously say otherwise. People prefer to err on the side of the law than on the side of the lawless. That is to say, on the side of predictability and structure. Most people pay no mind or have no objection toward most laws, and they never really have, like, ever. Like, throughout history. It's usually a particular set of laws that people really take issue with, and the rest is kind of uncontested, in my analysis or opinion. In any case, in regard to Javert, people don't like him because he didn't let Valjean go, or he treated Valjean like a criminal. I guess I didn't even introduce. Hopefully you know who Javert is. He's the inspector character, the police inspector. However, anyway, back to Javert, why you should be sympathetic to him. Okay, well, I don't even know why. People, like, the critiques of Javert don't make sense to me. Okay, Javert's job is not to be a judge. His job is to enforce the law, which it is popular to say that no one is above, right? Otherwise, the law kind of means nothing. I mean, technically speaking, it's kind of like the job of courts, judges, juries, and lawyers to consider and factor in the mitigating circumstances. It's not the police's job to let Valjean go or take into account his good that he did in his life. Like, that's the job of the judicial system, okay? Not the job of the police. But not only that, why would you want Javert to have let Valjean go? Is that really, like, how you want the standard conduct to be? Do you want cops to like dispassionately follow the uniform letter of the law, or to be their own judges who like make decisions based upon their own personal considerations, whims, or emotions? Pardon me, 1 second. All right, I'm back. It's been a few hours, so I've definitely lost some momentum at this point, but I guess I'll preface what I'm going to say next by sharing that I'm personally like incredibly attracted to redemption stories. Like genuinely, I think of them a lot. I find it pretty fascinating. I guess just something to consider. Okay, so that said, I genuinely do not understand the apparent droves of people who all too readily condemn Javert and kind of uncritically elevate Jean Valjean. And there's pretty much uncontestably a political element to all of this. Like I said, this is a very political novel. Kind of revolving around, I guess, popular conceptions about crime and criminals. I would say that the predominant sort of narrative in sociopolitics is largely kind of like, I think, what the Reddit post said that I showed, that crime is largely a system of an unjust system. In other words, the criminal, if they even accept the label, sometimes I think that like the state manufactures or defines criminal, sort of otherizes them because they're inconvenient or whatever. If they accept the label criminal, they believe that sometimes, often, that the criminal is only really reacting out against the corrupt and evil laws, the criminal justice system, society, that put them in a position to behave the way they are in the first place. In other words, that crime is largely symptomatic of a broader societal, like, structural issue or whatever. Or they read into it malevolence. I know if you like genuinely believe this, I know there's like nothing I can say to convince you otherwise. I mostly because I think that people who believe that are kind of like also lock in step with a whole bunch of other ideologies that kind of take like rejection of their postulations as additional proof of them, i.e. that like, I don't know, that like the capitalist state apparatus, like, I don't know, revitalizes itself by like brainwashing you to like perpetuate the system in your education, or like accusing the people who like contradict this sort of line of thinking as like personally invested or benefiting from the current system, whatever. The main thrust of all this is that I think there's kind of a contradiction. I guess I'll just point out for like the rest of the audience. There, let me look at my notes a little bit so I can see like the best, most delicate way I can frame this. Okay. I'm being a little cheeky here. Okay. First I'll state my position, which I think is sound. So as to contrast it against, I guess you would say my opposition's contentions here. Okay. So I believe redemption is universally, theoretically possible for anyone. But I think redemption is incredibly rare. Now, my detractors, intellectual detractors, I guess you would say, seem to claim that redemption is always possible, that the criminal is unnatural and manufactured. They say that Javert was a villain because he was an agent of the law and because he assumed that Jean Valjean could never change. The problem is that they are kind of incoherent because their actions, at least, reflect that they do not completely believe this. What do I mean? Take, for instance, this guy, Joseph James D'Angelo, who, according to Wikipedia, committed at least 13 murders, 51 rapes, and 121 burglaries from 1974 to 1986. He was arrested in 2018 at 73 years old, some 32-odd years since his last known crime. Does anyone mean to say that the police, having found him, should have, under any circumstances, let him go? I mean, he probably wasn't going to get up to any further crimes at that age, in his 70s. And what if he had a spiritual transformation in the decade since his last crime? Like Jean Valjean. Or if you would like more contemporary, more recent example, what about Steven van der Velde? Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name. The Olympic guy. He's quite an unpopular fellow at the moment. Steven van der Velde. I think that's how you say it. He's 30. When he was 19, he raped a 12-year-old girl. I suspect that most people would be incredibly suspicious that he could undergo a spiritual transformation, that he could ever be redeemed. They would probably never accept it, even theoretically. And so it kind of seems that such people simultaneously reject the universal theoretical redemption of man, but they also proclaim that the criminal can change and should not be forever condemned or looked down upon. I can already hear people saying that there's like a major difference between rape and murder and what Jean Valjean did, but it's kind of about the principle, really. And they, I mean, what is like the end state of like universal redemption care for like the specific or individual crime committed? Jean Valjean initially stole bread to feed his starving family. And I sympathize with that. The issue here is that people sort of like parade Jean Valjean around as this sort of like revolutionary like figure, a paragon, a symbol of resistance against like systematic justice in modern times, even though this is a fictional story from France 200 years ago. And this sort of crime that Jean Valjean did to initially get him into prison, the stealing of bread, that that is what I've heard termed noble crimes. And like I said, I sympathize with it. And if it's do or die, then you at least have my consent. Not that it means much to do whatever, to take whatever means necessary to survive. Where was I going with this? Yeah, so people sort of, I guess, take Jean Valjean and sort of like use him as proof or as a figurehead against like modern like criminal justice system, even though that type of like crime is virtually non-existent in the U.S. True enough that food insecurity sadly does exist, but starving to death isn't really a thing in the United States. Especially not how it was like in Europe 2 centuries ago, where they would exhume, or they would study the bodies of children who died. They would find like dirt in their digestive systems. I'm pretty sure people eat leather at like Valley Forge. Ash cakes. That kind of starvation just doesn't really exist anymore. Yet, I believe property crimes, specifically larceny, is like the most common crime in the country. I speak for the United States, of course. And is that being done out of absolute necessity? in the kind of, if they don't do it, they'll die, the last resort. Not really, no. Not at all, basically. It's often, done for fungibility purposes, resale or convenience, thrill. Like I said, people aren't starving to death. Sadly, food insecurity, though. But they cling to Valjean anyway. But does it even make sense like intertextually? Because like the other comment pointed out, I mean, Jean Valjean, his sentence, in length was lengthened by like triple because he kept trying to escape. And then when he got out, before he went on his path to redemption, he broke parole because he robbed a kid. Well, and he robbed the bishop too, but the bishop forgave him. And then he robbed a kid. And Javert is universally hated because he becomes the villain. I mean, because he's skeptical of Jean Valjean's redemption. Don't even get me started on like the recidivism rate in like the United States today. But we're not blind to the fact that, particularly for people who get out of prison, there's not a lot of data or research on this. I'm not sure if it's like the institutional review boards that like make this data and like research on this like impossible to find. But it is said, and I guess it makes theoretical sense, but I don't know like what the data says. And I guess to be fair, I haven't looked as much into this issue. I guess if people have good resources, they can share. But I mean, sure, former ex-felons, when they get out, they'll obviously have they won't be able to get as many jobs as they would have before they were branded a felon, which they'll be permanently labeled as such as often. And it seems that, at least I've heard, I don't know to what extent it's true, that they'll have difficulty getting into programs, government and social programs and all the rest. So I don't know the extent of that is true, and just how devastating it is in the sense that is like how limited are their job prospects, and what kind of desperation does that ring? Is it the do or die survival, or is it just more inconvenient? Like, could they possibly find a less attractive job? I mean, it doesn't take much to get enough food to survive. I mean, it's not glamorous, but like I said, I'm speaking of the absolute dying of starvation, which was the case in this book and in history. You can work like a minimum wage job for an hour and get theoretically enough ramen in 1 hour to feed yourself for a day. Like I said, once again, I'm speaking only of the starving to death germane to this discussion. Obviously, that's not ideal or nutritious, and it could bring other health problems and all the rest, but I'm talking about survival here. I don't know. And that's the thing, too. People don't like how felons are permanently like castigated from society, but at the same time, they do. Because, like I said, it's basically like the noble crimes are perceived to be noble crimes that people, I think, should be let off. But, for example, I'm sure that most people would, even most people who are upset that felons like lose their or get permanently marked in society, I'm sure those same people care and support like a sex offender registry. Or the business owners, it's probably a liability issue if they like unknowingly hired certain felons. So the information is useful. I don't know. It just seems like a lose-lose situation in all ways. So I don't know if it's even worth like looking at the criminal justice system and like marginally improving it more to like the rehabilitative instead of like retributive layout, or if it's just worth it more to try to curb crime as much as possible, or stop the instigation of it. I don't know. That's amusing. Just to get back on topic here, so I feel like my position is like kind of like the only consistent one as it pertains to redemption, because like I said, I think it's always theoretically possible, but incredibly rare. And I kind of explained a little bit the folly of those who kind of contradict themselves and kind of blame the system in all cases, and will not even like countenance the potential redemption of those they do not like. So that's like my part of my like soliloquy about crime here. I don't know. I guess we'll talk a little bit. I have like different sections and stuff like that. I'm not going to get to it all. Like I have this one about power, like the nature of power and monarchy and stuff like that. I think the final like section we'll talk about here would be like the psychology of Jean Valjean. So just forget about everything I said before. This is like a new section. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Jean Valjean, particularly at the ending. If you're still even watching this and you haven't read the book, I guess, then like spoiler alert. Okay, sorry. I need to stop with the tick there of laughing. Right, so at the end, Marius and Cosette, they get married. And Jean Valjean, after their wedding, confesses to Marius that he's an ex-con, a felon. And it's just, there's just really some strange behavior from Valjean. At first, I thought it was just like weakness in Hugo's writing. And that was wrong of me. I think he's tapping into like a deep psychological, I don't know what I would say, psychological war within Mr. Jean Valjean. Right, so what am I talking about? Well, even though at that point Javert is dead and Jean Valjean himself is legally dead, he faked his death. And he knows that nobody's looking for him. The weight of his conscience, and the guilt, I guess, of living under a name that wasn't his own, Fauchelevent, compelled him to confess his past to Marius. So, like I said, despite like knowing that there's no one looking for him, he gives these like spurious reasons that he doesn't want to get grabbed by the police and ruin Marius and Cosette's reputation. So he's like contradicting himself in multiple ways. He knows no one's looking for him, but he doesn't want to get caught. But then he still wants to see Cosette anyway. He offers to come at nights. It's just really odd behavior. And so I thought about this, like, what is like the complex that's going on here? Is there like a persecution complex? Is he self-punishing? Is he acclimated by the years to acting this way, looking over his shoulder? Was he only ever keeping up the lie for the sake of Cosette? But now that she has a new protector, the calculation changes. Does he feel unworthy? Does he not want to be a burden? I don't know. It's got some deep like psychological scars going on here. I also got some like more practical questions too, because it's Marius's reaction is kind of bizarre. So when Valjean admits that he's a felon, Marius is shocked, and he's like, "How could this terrible workman create such a beautiful work?" It's ridiculous. He goes on this long, in that similar vein. He's like, "What? How can Well, he's like, I guess it's not uncommon for their like a tile. I think he's thinking he's like a pile of dung can like spring out a flower. It's kind of ridiculous because like 6 months previous at that point, Marius just tried to like overthrow the government, and in the course of doing so, he literally murdered people. But now he's like, Valjean is not even this man is not even like on the social ladder. It's just, I don't know, it's bizarre. I guess, yeah. I don't know. Anyway, back to Valjean. And this part's really sad. So Valjean, after he confesses, he slowly pushes Cosette away. He tells her to stop calling him father. And he speaks to her in much more formal way, a detached way. Pushes onto her gulf between them, really. While simultaneously, his presence is unwanted by Marius at that point, who doesn't know the extent of Valjean's past, like what other crimes, who knows where he got all his money, who knows what else he's done. So Marius is like slowly trying to exclude him and send a message that he's no longer welcome. It's just sad. And then Valjean stops coming. And it kills him. They reconcile at the end, the last couple pages, but by that point it's too late. It's just really sad. I understand Valjean's his pain, at least conceptually, that he wants deep down for Cosette to fight back, even though he's pushing her away. He wants them to salvage the connection they have, but it falls apart anyway. He wants to be saved by them. And because the connection falls apart, it kind of confirms to him that it wasn't real, or at least tenuous and pretended, the strength of their connection. Some would argue that it's like a self-fulfilling or self-destructive prophecy. Others would argue that it's maybe revealing the truth, that he was easily enough forgotten, that he served his purpose. I don't know. Right. Sorry. It got kind of heavy. I think we're ready to do a conclusion here. Right. Les Misérables by Victor Hugo. A French epic by all definitions. Should you read this book? I don't know. It's confounding, really, truly. I don't know who or what kind of person I would recommend read Les Misérables. I don't even know like what the modern readership would even be. I'm pretty curious, actually. I heard it's not often even read in France. Yeah. I don't know who I'd recommend it to or who reads it. It's definitely a big commitment. Yeah. I don't think I would recommend an abridgment, even though this would be like the perfect candidate for an abridgment, because the man really needed an editor. The problem with abridgments, in my opinion, though, is that I'd rather trust the author's imperfect intent rather than like a modern compiler or editor to like tell the story. Yeah. So I can't really ever recommend an abridgment, personally. But if it works for you, I guess maybe check it out. don't know, maybe just take it slow. I think there's about 360 some chapters. So I think some people take like a year to read it. I just basically did like 20 pages a day. Do whatever works for you if you're interested in it. But life really is too short. Maybe it is too short to read Les Miserables. I don't know. There's lots of good books out there. Lots of things to learn. And I guess if you're talking about like in economic terms, like the opportunity cost or whatever, perhaps your time would be better served even in a different book. I don't know. I feel like this kind of became a bummer at the end. Well, thank you for watching the video. I hope I didn't like piss you off too much. But even if you are, I feel like you're kind of not at the same time, because at least I'm giving you something to talk about. At least I'm making you think. Even if you like strenuously disagree with me, at least I'm making you think. And you make me think too. Think through our positions and strengthen them and why we think the way we do. So, and it's, yeah, I mean, I can handle it. But, all right, well, thank you for watching. I hope you have a good one.